Thank you, Julie. And folks, you just feel free if you have a question, you can, unmute yourself or throw something in the chat, whatever you're most comfortable with. But I'll start out with a great big one for you, Julie. And when you think about the polarization and divisiveness in politics today, what do you think are a couple things that elected officials can do to diffuse that?
Well, as I mentioned, I do think, and I still think it's true, for the legislators that serve Greater Minnesota, it's still divided. It's still Democrat, Republican. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for Nick Frentz up in Mankato. We have worked on so much legislation and have done really good things. There's about 5 issues that you want to stay away from that, they're not going to make a difference to me or to him one way or another. I think a lot of what happens in Washington rubs off here too, and it was never like that. And unfortunately, I see more of that. COVID did not help because, again, it's all about relationships. It's about sitting next to a Democrat from Hennepin County in committee and, sharing a snack or talking about your kids, even taking field trips, which I have done to other senators' districts, just to see what is happening. And everybody wants to do a great job for their district, for certain, but we come at it at different ways. We probably get more done than people realize in a very bipartisan way. And it's easy to focus on the what's negative and that, okay, we didn't get all of our work done this year, blah, blah, blah. But we did get a lot of work done, and in a very bipartisan way that I think we need to recognize also. It is those relationships. And there's also this that's called Marty's Law, where you can't spend more than $5 on a legislator. And that sounds really great in principle, but what's happened is the people from the metro area just go home. They aren't going to these meetings or get-togethers after session and having a cocktail, eating a little bit of food, discussing. It's amazing. Just that little interaction has such an impact on that relationship that on the next day onto the floor, because now you have a connection. And it's been very hard to connect because of Marty's Law, but more so because of COVID. There are House members that could walk through this door. I wouldn't even know who they are. And that's probably a lot of my fault too. But they have, we were there present with our masks. We were working with our masks. There was an option whether if you wanted or not. And it worked for the Senate. The House refused to come in for a very, very long time. And it was hard. It was hard for the speaker to get that cohesiveness and that kind of, I think, transcended into the rest of the session, because people locked down. They were just like, no, this is what I want. We have them on our side too, trust me. We have these people that are just in these little boxes, but you've got to reach across the aisle because there is always a compromise, always.
Absolutely. I've got a bunch of questions, but does anybody else want to pop in here before I guess I'll just throw out another one as folks think about it too. You talked about running with children at home, and how did you balance all that? And what's your advice to maybe somebody in this, in this meeting today who's got kids at home and is thinking about running for the legislature?
That's a great question, Teresa. So fortunately, I did have help. I had Marge because my husband traveled so much, and I was able to make that work. But I think where I failed is to not let people know at the Capitol how difficult it was, and I just sucked it up. Men, if I can be honest, men like to complicate things. They like to just twist it all up and throw a grenade in. Oh, sorry, Bobby. You're see, someone's on here. But all that, sometimes in my world, it's like, let's do an amendment that's going to derail it and slow it down for 4 or 5 days. And the women are like, nope, nope, nope. We've got things to do. We got to get home. We can make this work. I'm telling you what, the women that we lost up at the Capitol, they were workhorses. And that's very typical what's happened. We do have a new senator. She's been elected 2 years ago, and Julia Coleman, Norm Coleman's daughter-in-law, and she has what is he, 2.5-year-old, and then had a new set of twins that were very challenged medically. So with the Zoom and all that leniency that we could have, she was able to still go through a very difficult pregnancy and have these babies and still have the adjustment. I don't see us going back to you have to be in person. I don't see that because, and I've complained about it. I mean, it's very hard to set a budget when somebody's on Zoom and has an amendment. You know, you're not in. It's difficult, or to get all your testimony through Zoom. There is something missing. However, I do think for the best for going forward and to bridge that issue of women who do have other responsibilities, I do think we're going to have a hybrid going forward. And we just have to understand. I hope the women that do have a lot of responsibilities, and they're really no different than the men. And there's men that have full-time jobs that are doing this too. And so they are working very diligently also. But I think going forward, we'll continue to have a hybrid. I do notice too, and I meant to say this earlier, that when we were in the minority in 11 and 12, we had a whole new crop of freshmen. And they came in and they're all principled and they're all ginned up, and they caused us so many problems because they were just no, no, no on everything. Well, that's not good. That's not healthy. We lost the majority. We went into the minority for 4 years. And I always say there's nothing more important than keeping that gavel. If you really, really want to make a difference, you got to keep the gavel. And by the way, the state of Minnesota is one of, I think we're the only divided government. The governor the other day said there's another state, but I don't know who that is. But and we hold a 1-seat majority in the Senate. We have attracted 2 Senate Democrats from the Iron Range up north to come and caucus with us, but they have separate offices and they are still allowed to vote on budget issues. They are in sync with us, but on other social issues, they can do it with what they want. But it is really, really difficult when you have a 1-vote margin in the Senate Republicans, a House that is Democrat ruled, and of course the governor is a Democrat. It's difficult, but it's also very healthy, because I can tell you those states that have all Republican or all Democrat, they are in a mess too. They aren't getting things done. And I'd like to say we've actually done a really good job with maneuvering through that when you have to. But going back to the, keeping the majority and being able to influence the state that way to keep the balance. Those people that were so hardline, so far right in 11 and 12, they're now coming our way, and I can honestly call them a sensible, and that's what we are. We're sensibles. It's yes, for me, I'm a Republican, but I'm also a sensible Republican. I'm not going to shut the state down just to prove my principle is right. That's not good for the state, and you always have to remember that. So it's funny how all those years, finally, people that have been there long enough understand and have the tools it takes to start becoming a sensible instead of a wrench in the wheel.
Yeah, and I hear you too. And I think that what we really learned in these 100 meetings we did across the state was that even though meeting virtually can be problematic, and for those of us, like I still get my internet over the phone line. I mean, there's a lot of barriers, but on the barrier side, it really can remove barriers for rural women to participate. And I think the place, probably local government, it's a little more difficult, where it should be easier to participate virtually. So those are just some of the comments we've been picking up from people on that. So I hear you there. And I guess one other question I'll throw out before anybody else jumps in here is, I think people were really hopeful that you'd maybe take a shot at Congress. So just a thought on that of, what if you considered it, or why if you just decided you were done, or what your thoughts are around that.
That's a funny story, Teresa. And I don't know if I've thanked you enough for the forums that you've had around the state. That's tremendous. That gets people talking, gets women involved, engaged, and maybe they can figure something out to be engaged. So thank you again for that. But this was back, it was Congressman Walz, and I can't remember what year it was, but it was very smart on his part. He called me up and he said, "Hey, would you like to go to this State of the State, President Obama?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I'd love to, thank you." And I think he realized I was a strong ag woman, and that I could be probably a threat to him. So we get out there. The first thing he does, he takes me to his office, and he opens his closet and says, "This is where I sleep," and it's a blow-up bed. I'm like, "Really?" Yeah, there's like over 40 of us that sleep in our offices and then go down and shower and exercise and eat downstairs in the basement. I'm like, okay, all right. That's not going to work for me, but okay. And then President Obama has his speech, and it was wonderful, and I got to sit with the veterans, and that was great. And then we went over to Speaker Pelosi's Sueur, and we had her little party, and had a chance to talk to her, and she was just engaging, just lovely. So after our conversation, I'm standing there and I'm listening to two other congressmen talking, and they said to each other, I'll never forget this. They go, "Well, I don't know his name. He's only been here 4 years. Why would I remember his name?" And I'm like, "Nope, this is not for me." You gotta be there a long time to really make an impact, I think. Yeah. And I think you can make, for me, I can make a stronger impact for the district I served, and for the state, being in the Senate.
I love it. Well, thanks, Julie. Okay, you guys, who wants to ask a question? I know that there's questions out there. I don't want to dominate everything.
I have one. So kind of back to Teresa's first question, especially coming into college, you notice a lot more views, because when I came from my small town, everyone was pretty similar in a lot of different views, and you only found like a few instances in which you would disagree with someone. And then coming to college, it's been kind of cool getting to hear diverse views and everything. But of course, considering the kind of almost hostility that exists between two people when they have different views, sometimes it's hard to feel like you can talk about those things without it erupting into a bigger argument. So I was just curious how you as yourself find ways in which to communicate with people about like different principles without like having that arise, because I feel like sometimes I run into that barrier, unfortunately, when I want to talk to people where we differ, but it's sometimes hard because you fear that it might erupt into something more.
That fear is tough, isn't it? And if it stops the conversation, that's too bad. But sometimes when you turn it around and ask, "Well, why do you feel that way?" and ask them to really explain why they feel so strongly about an issue, you may have to stop for a second and really think about why they're all ginned up. There's a lot of passionate issues right now too, and not saying that we haven't all along, but it seems that there is a lot of passionate issues. So I would just take the time to pick your battle. Is it that important too that you win that discussion? Maybe it's more important that you sit and listen, and then you'll have maybe another opportunity to come back and give your viewpoint. But yeah, I don't think it's always important or that good to always feel like you have to win that discussion or that battle. But you also have to stay firm and just say, "This is how I feel. I'm open to discussions," but yeah, pick your battle. Kind of like raising kids.
I love it. Marcy has a question in the chat. Marcy, do you want to ask your question, or?
Sure. Good morning. Thank you, Senator Rosen. Those are excellent comments. So now you see that there are a number of retired rural leaders online, and we've had discussion about what do we do in our retirement. What are your plans to stay engaged? And how do you step away from a leadership position but still are engaged in issues and in people?
That's a great question, Mercy. I should be asking that question. I should be, because everybody's like, what are you going to do? Well, what's your next steps? And how are you going to survive? My kids are like, you going to be okay? I'm going to be just fine. But there is a very, when I got the news that Senator Draheim and I and our districts were combined because of declining in population. So the Senate district that I served went all the way around Mankato up to Scott County, basically, and large districts. So it was obvious that we've got a young businessman who is very, very good, kids at home. And I was like, yes, I'm going to retire. I'd been thinking about it. It's always every election cycle you go through this. Should I do it? Can I be effective? How's it going to affect my family, my health, all that? And so it was a no-brainer. But when that announcement came out, there were tears because I was very, and still am, probably emotional about being relevant. And I still want to make a difference and be relevant about that. And it doesn't have to, so I have to figure out how that's going to look. The most important thing, and I think right now for me, is just to get my act together with my life, my closets and garden. There's so much stuff that's been put behind because of the commitments and the job. But going forward, I hope to be able to make an impact somewhere. Yeah. Does anybody else have any advice for me? I mean, am I doing the right thing by cleaning a closet? Some of my sisters said, yeah, clean your house. That really does help.
I'll weigh in.
Yeah, Jean.
Hi.
Hi.
Julie has a granddaughter in Germany. She needs to go see that child. And she has displayed recently a new role of hers, which Julie is my senator and has been, and we had conversations so many years ago. But recently she really went out on the limb by taking a very strong stance, not only for a potential candidate, but against another one, which is kind of unheard of. And the front page of one of the local newspapers had a joint letter from Julie and Bob Gunther, another retired state representative. And it was jaw-dropping in terms of pointing out to voters what the choices that they had. And they were going right at Republican primary voters. So being able to have a voice doesn't stop when you're an elected official. You just have a different role. So I really appreciated that she was willing to use her voice in that way. Like I said, with jaw-dropping because she has maintained a pretty middle ground viewpoint, enough that her favorite Democrat and others have felt comfortable voting for her for many, many years, and only communicated with her, at least on my part, on very personal issues, not on policy issues, but checking in with her in terms of how she was feeling and how she was thinking about what was happening in that moment. So I have greatly loved being able to do that. I love her, and I love the impact she has on the world. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Jean.
So I don't know what question to ask you other than maybe for the people who are thinking about running, to say a little more about what are the things that you think about that sustain you in those early years as you were really trying to get your footing? What do you wish you'd done more or less of to be able to kind of stay in the game? Because I think that is something maybe people think about in the very early stages. How am I going to manage this?
So if I could just address that first comment about that potential candidate, it infuriated me that would be somebody that would represent these amazing. I mean, I was basically crying in my retirement speech when I talked about the people that I represent, because of they're just hardworking, honest, good people, and to have that phony baloney, I couldn't do it. Just couldn't do it. And I always have maintained very, very solid relationships with everybody. So was it hard? No. It was the right thing to do, absolutely. And the same for Bob Gunther too. The other thing about getting involved is, and I mentioned, I probably failed to mention the three things. You have to be, a woman, I notice, has to be asked. Number two, they have to be, they have to know that they can do better than what is already presented to them, or what is there currently. They can do better than that. And the third piece, they have to feel passionate about something that gets them intimately involved in a subject area. And then from that point, it's just flat out relationships that takes it from there. I sometimes feel like me not knowing anything at all and not having a preconceived notion about what I was doing or what I was getting into. It's just that I was, and at that time I was so angry with property taxes. It's like, it's important, but it's not the driver at the time. I think we were paying for sidewalks or something through our property taxes and never got them. And I was all, worked up over that. Because there's so many things that you can make an impact on at the Capitol. And it's really interesting to see how people, what they fall into, what subject area they fall into, that completely surprises them. I had no idea about drugs. I had no children, I had no family, no relatives that struggled with drug addiction. And all of a sudden I'm flying around the nation talking about the biggest meth bill in the nation and how we got it done. And I'll tell you how we got it done. We, for 9 months, met twice a month in Albert Lea at the Elks Lodge there, and brought down all these people from the state, whether it's research or the Judges Association, police, the retailers. It was like 30 people, and we met twice a month to create this meth bill. And I remember the first year we didn't get anything done. I mean, the lights went off, actually, literally went off on the floor. The second year, Senator Berglund, who was the Democrat chair of HHS, calls me on a Saturday and says, Julie, tell me, how you doing, blah, 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 the kids, and she goes, well, you need help. How did she say it? She goes, let's talk about the meth bill. And she starts talking about it. And I said, Linda, are you going to take that bill from me? Because, I'm a freshman. What am I doing with this huge bill? She goes, no, but you need help. There is no way you're going to get this through committees without my help. So we testified together at the table, which was unheard of. We did it together. We presented the bill on the floor together. It was how it should be. And she was such a great example on how to get things done. And I've had a lot of those mentors that have just, if you're eager and you're willing to learn, people will gladly give you help.
I love it. And Julia, we have another question from Amy Johnson. And just as Amy's unmuting here, mentorship was a huge piece that came out of these meetings too, is people trying mentorship and mental health and all those pieces. But Amy, I'm going to hand it over to you to ask your question.
Thank you, Teresa, and good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Amy.
Amy Johnson from Grant County, Minnesota, and I'm a trailblazing entrepreneur representing the military community, serving employers throughout the state of Minnesota. I'm also running for mayor of Ashby this fall, and I have 3 young boys at home. So I'm curious, you had mentioned that if you would have done something different, you would have expressed how difficult it is to balance family and what you were doing in the Senate. So how would have you gone about expressing this to the Senate, and how do you think they would have received that message?
Well, oh, that's a really good question. Number one, thank you for running, for doing that. That is a great example for your kids, and excellent for you to do that and for your community. I think I would not, as I said, I think I would not have made it look so easy. Coming up on Sunday nights, you know, leaving on Thursday nights. I remember one time where my youngest left his tennis shoes in the car that I drove up to the Capitol, and he had a meet. And I said, I have to go get his tennis shoes down to St. Peter. And they're like, well, you can't leave now. And I said, well, I'm leaving. You know, it was, oh man, this is hard to say because it's still a little bit of a good old boys group. It really is. COVID has loosened it up a bit, but if you don't talk about some of the struggles and what you have to do to get to where you're at, or to make that commitment, or to bring the kids along, or any of that, they're not going to know, because you're going to make it look easy. And I made it look easy, but it was extremely hard on me. You know, and it was hard on the kids too. But when I got home, it was catch up, cooking, run, and then you'd go back to the Capitol and work. So I don't think I played that very well. I should have expressed more that you know, the hours are not very. You need to give us more time to get our children together. Let us know what your expectations are for committees and what needs to happen that way. The campaigning part, that's fine. The kids always came with me and they were very active that way. But when it was up at the Capitol, that 2.5 hour difference of travel, it was really, really difficult. Yeah. So just the organization. And I don't think I talked enough about that. Just got there, did my work, and then left. I don't know if I explained that very well, but so
Unknown caller.
don't be afraid to verbalize, you know, how this job is affecting your children, good or bad.
Yeah. Well, that's great advice and a good question. I know we're running out of time here. We only have a few minutes left. So, Julie, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share? Any advice, any perspective that you'd like to share with the folks at the meeting today?
Thank you for that again, for allowing just my perspective on things. And I'm pretty simple about the way I view things. It's pretty straightforward, and it's not fluff. Someone did mention the mental health that came up. Huge piece, and that's a perfect example for working in a bipartisan manner and getting something done that's so critical for the state. Senator Nick France and several other Democrats and myself and Rich Draheim, we just had the bill signing on Monday. It was the last bill. It got voted on at 11:58, right before midnight on Sunday. And it's a really good bill. When I started, you didn't even talk about mental health and Health and Human Services Committee. You never mentioned it. We'd fund it, but you would never talk about it. And now the needs are so great in all the spectrums, all the sectors, all over, from kids to our veterans to our aging, all over. And we are really working hard to get the resources out to handle this crisis that we're in. So very good, feel very, very, very good about that bill.
Yeah, I was excited to see that pass. I thought that was wonderful. So I'm glad to see that. A couple quick things. I know we're going to wrap here. I have a couple ideas of what you could do in your retirement with 100 Rural Women, so we'll follow up on that to keep you engaged there. But we also just threw a survey in the chat too. We really like to hear from people. What did you think? What can we do better? Who are some other women you'd like to hear from? Do you have friends you'd like to suggest that would be great to feature? And then I'm just going to hand over Marcy quick to help us close out here to talk a little bit about what we're doing at 100 Rural Women. And Marcy's been helping us out working with the University of Minnesota. So Marcy.
Oh, thank you, Teresa. And again, thank you, Senator Rosen. You hit on all of those points for those of us that have served or wish to serve and know firsthand what it's like to have a woman or a number of women in the room for those discussions. So congratulations on 20 years of service to the state of Minnesota and on that mental health bill. You are right. There are a lot of things that were accomplished in a bipartisan manner that we don't hear much about. And we know that we'll see the effects of those as we move forward. So we also know that, as you mentioned, you were cheap, free labor for a long time as a community leader. And all of you who have been on any of these 100 Rural Women calls know how effective they are in connecting women throughout the state. So we are on a campaign to fund the next graduate research assistant, and there are two ways you or those around you can support 100 Rural Women. There's a click on the Rural Women website that'll take you to the site where, what's that called, Teresa? When
it's the GoFundMe site with the University of Minnesota.
Right, there's a GoFundMe site. And this is supporting the graduate research assistants through the Mary Page Fund. And some of you have heard this before, but I had the absolute honor of serving with Mary Page, who was a Renville County Commissioner for 8 years and a University of Minnesota Regent back in the 80s and 90s when there were very few females around. Katie was one of the few House representatives, and as you mentioned, Julie Linda Berglund, I'm thinking of all of those early women who were pioneers in state and local elected leadership. So go girls. So yes, our goal is $25,000 to support the graduate research assistant, and we will be putting together a campaign starting in August and really blast that out. So we would appreciate anything, 5, 10, 15, 500, whatever each of you might be able to contribute as we go forward, so we can get a pot of money in our coffers before we go public with that. And Amy, good luck with your run in Ashby.
Yes.
It's a wonderful community, and thank you for your work with the vets.
Thank you.
Well, great. I know we're a couple minutes over, so I just want to again thank you, Senator Rosen, for joining us today and being willing to share about your journey and just your perspectives and what you've experienced. I just think it's just wonderful for people to see all these different pathways to leadership and seeing a place for yourself and seeing a way for you to navigate. So thanks again, everyone, for joining today, and join another event next week. I'll just throw that pitch out. We're doing online yoga. It's free. We do noon on Mondays and 8 o'clock in the morning on Tuesdays. Take a half hour for yourself and just kick back. We also do some open networking. So check out our website and see all the fun things that we're doing this summer, and just join in. And we love to see your faces, and let us know what we can do to build supports and build more connections to support you in your efforts. So thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great weekend.